I smiled at the exact moment everything was supposed to break me. No one at that Thanksgiving table noticed it, not my husband, not his parents, not even the woman sitting beside him who wasn't supposed to be there. They thought they were destroying me. What they didn't know was that I had already been preparing for that moment for 11 days. And by the time the truth came out, it wouldn't just end my marriage. It would ruin an entire family. If you think you know how this ends, you don't. Subscribe now, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this story? It's going to stay with you. My name is Sarah Collins, and I built my life on control. As a senior accountant in Chicago, I trusted numbers more than people. Numbers don't betray you, they reveal patterns, intentions, truths hiding in plain sight. I built a career on that certainty. 2 years ago, I married Ethan Caldwell. He was quiet, gentle, easy to love. Or at least, easy to believe in. I thought his silence meant stability. Peace. I didn't understand yet that silence can also mean absence. I tried to build something real with him. A home that felt warm. Dinners that felt meaningful. A life that felt safe. And every Sunday, we sat at his parents' table. Richard and Elaine Caldwell. That's where I first felt it, that subtle tension beneath polite smiles. The kind that doesn't explode, it lingers. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. Richard Caldwell didn't raise his voice to control a room. He didn't have to. Everything about him was calculated, his posture, his pauses, even the way he looked at you when you spoke. Like he was measuring your worth in real time, and already unimpressed. From the beginning, I knew I wasn't what he wanted for his son. I didn't come from legacy. No old family name. No inherited wealth. Just discipline, education, and a career I built from nothing. To him, that meant I was temporary. Ethan never challenged it. He would sit there, listening as his father made subtle comments about family continuity, about the importance of heirs, about women who understand their role. And every time, Ethan stayed quiet. Not once did he correct him. Not once did he defend me. At first, I told myself he was avoiding conflict. But over time, I started to wonder if his silence meant something else. Because silence, when it repeats itself long enough, stops being neutral and starts becoming a choice. The first comment came wrapped in a smile. Elaine placed the dessert in front of me, her voice soft, almost sweet. "You'll need to learn how to make this properly someday, for your children." I smiled back, polite. "Maybe you can teach me." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh, I assumed you already knew, or at least were preparing." It sounded harmless. Anyone else at the table might have missed it. But I didn't. Because Richard didn't look at me, he looked at Ethan. And Ethan looked down. That was the moment I understood something subtle, but sharp. This wasn't just conversation. It was expectation. From that night on, the comments became routine. Small questions. Casual remarks. Always about timing, about family, about what comes next. Never directly accusing, but never innocent. And every time, I answered calmly. I smiled. I adjusted. I stayed composed. But inside, something was starting to shift. Because I wasn't being included in this family. I was being evaluated. It didn't stay subtle for long. At a family dinner a few months later, Elaine didn't bother hiding it behind politeness anymore. She set her glass down, looked straight at me, and said, "Some women just wait too long, and then act surprised when it's too late." The room went quiet. I felt every pair of eyes shift toward me, measuring, waiting. I kept my voice steady. "We're not in a rush." Richard let out a low, humorless chuckle. That's what people say when they don't understand what's at stake. I turned to Ethan. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. That silence hit harder than anything his parents could have said. Because in that moment, it wasn't just their judgment. It was his permission. I finished dinner like nothing happened. Smiled when expected. Thanked Elaine for the meal. But on the drive home, the silence between us felt heavier than ever. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself if I was overreacting. I started asking why he was letting it happen. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, deliberate. Family gatherings became colder. Invitations started feeling like obligations instead of welcomes. Conversations would pause when I entered the room, then resume in a different tone, carefully filtered. I wasn't imagining it anymore. I was being repositioned. At one dinner, Richard raised a glass and spoke about legacy again, but this time, he didn't even look at me. A family line depends on strong decisions, he said, his voice calm, controlled. Not delays. No one corrected him. Not Elaine. Not Ethan. That night, I checked my phone in the bathroom and saw a message from a distant cousin of Ethan's, someone I barely spoke to. "Are you okay?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't just happening inside that house. They were talking about me, outside of it. Quietly shaping a narrative I wasn't part of. And somehow, I was already losing something I hadn't realized was being taken. I stopped correcting them. That was the first real change. Not because I agreed, but because I realized it didn't matter what I said anymore. Every explanation I gave felt like it was being quietly dismissed before it even landed. So I went quiet. At dinners, I smiled when expected, spoke when addressed, and stayed carefully composed. I became agreeable. Predictable. Easy to overlook. At home, Ethan acted like nothing was wrong. He'd ask about my day, sit beside me on the couch, talk about work like we were still normal. I started answering less. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because I was beginning to see the pattern. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was alignment. And the more I watched him, the more something inside me settled into place. Not panic. Not sadness. Something colder. Because when you finally stop hoping someone will defend you, you start asking a different question. Why would they, if they never intended to? The answer didn't come from him. It came from a file. 11 days before Thanksgiving, I stayed late at the office, finishing a routine audit for a private clinic. It wasn't unusual, just numbers, invoices, patient records. The kind of work I could do almost automatically. Until I saw his name. Ethan Caldwell. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But the date caught my attention years before we met. I shouldn't have looked further. But I did. And what I found didn't feel like a mistake. It felt intentional. I didn't react immediately. I didn't confront him. I didn't even take a picture. I closed the file. Went home. Cooked dinner. Listened to him talk about his day. And said nothing. Because in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. If I moved too fast, I'd lose the truth. So I did the one thing no one expected from me. I waited. And that night, for the first time, I wasn't trying to save my marriage. I was preparing to expose it. From the outside, nothing changed. That was the strange part, how easily life kept pretending. Ethan still kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Still asked if I needed anything from the store. Still sat across from me at dinner like we were just another quiet couple trying to make it work. But I was watching differently now. Not emotionally. Strategically. I started noticing what he avoided. Certain phone calls taken outside. Certain topics that made his jaw tighten for half a second too long. Patterns that only showed themselves when you stopped participating and started observing. At his parents' house, Richard was even more confident now. Almost satisfied, like something was already decided and just hadn't been announced yet. Elaine had started speaking to me less altogether. And Ethan. Ethan became a bridge between us. Always neutral. Always careful. Never choosing a side. That was the moment I understood the real power in this family. It wasn't loud. It was protected by silence. And I was no longer interested in surviving it. I was interested in breaking it open. I stopped looking for answers in what people said. I started looking at what they avoided. Every conversation now felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Richard's confidence. Elaine's sudden distance. Ethan's carefully measured calm. It wasn't chaos, it was coordination. So I began collecting details. Times Ethan left the house without explanation. Calls he took in silence. Emails he deleted too quickly when I walked in. Small things, but consistent. And consistency always tells the truth eventually. At work, I extended my hours, not because I needed to, but because I needed distance. Space to think without interruption. To connect dots without emotion interfering. And the more I observed, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a strained marriage. It was a structure. Built long before I entered it. And I was no longer inside it by accident. I was inside it because someone allowed me to be. The first real move wasn't dramatic. It was precise. I contacted Ethan's clinic under a simple pretext: administrative verification for insurance records. No suspicion, no urgency. Just routine professionalism. That's how I got access to archived files. And that's where I saw it. A procedure record. Years before our marriage. Not flagged. Not discussed. Quietly documented and buried in standard formatting. Vasectomy. My hands didn't shake. Not immediately. Because shock came second. First came confirmation. I cross-checked dates, signatures, approvals. Everything aligned too cleanly to be accidental. I didn't confront him that night. I cooked dinner. I listened to him talk about his day. And I studied his face while he smiled at me. Because now I understood something fundamental. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about knowledge. He knew the truth about himself. And let me carry the blame anyway. The problem with truth is that it creates pressure. Once I knew about the vasectomy, everything else started shifting under it, like the entire family structure had been built on a lie that was now quietly cracking. But I couldn't act yet. Because I wasn't alone in what I knew. At work, a colleague mentioned something casual. Ethan's name came up in a conversation about medical audits being cleaned up before family involvement. It was subtle, almost meaningless, until I connected it to the file access pattern I had already seen. Someone had been careful. Too careful. So I pulled back. I stopped digging loudly and started listening again. At home, Ethan noticed nothing. Or acted like he didn't. That was his real skill, making deception feel like routine. But I saw it now. The system protecting him wasn't just family loyalty. It was coordination. And if I moved wrong, I wouldn't just expose him. I would alert them all. I made a decision that cost me more than I expected. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I simply became busy. Work deadlines. Late audits. Quiet excuses that no one could easily challenge without looking controlling. Ethan didn't push back. That told me everything I needed to know. During those weeks, I focused on one thing: stability. I confirmed what I had already seen in the records, documented everything carefully, and secured copies in places no one in his family would ever think to look. But the real sacrifice wasn't logistical. It was emotional distance. I stopped trying to read Ethan like a husband. I started reading him like evidence. And that change was irreversible. One evening, he finally asked, almost casually, "Are you pulling away from my family?" I looked at him for a long second. And said, "No. I'm just starting to see them clearly." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because in his silence, I already knew I was close. Thanksgiving arrived like a stage already set. Every detail felt intentional, the polished table, the guest list, the calm smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Richard greeted me like nothing had changed, as if distance and silence were just temporary inconveniences. But I saw it now. This wasn't a dinner. It was execution. Ethan sat beside me, unusually composed. Elaine barely spoke. And Richard. Richard looked almost satisfied, like he was waiting for a moment he had rehearsed too many times. Then he stood and placed something on the table. Documents. Divorce papers. Already filled out. Already prepared. A quiet shock moved through the room, followed by a controlled silence. Richard spoke calmly, "It's time to stop pretending this marriage is working." I didn't react. Because I was already ready. My phone vibrated under the table. A message from my best friend, Laura. "It's time." She had the envelope. And inside it, was everything they didn't know I had. Richard didn't look at me when he slid the divorce papers forward. He looked at the table, like the outcome was already decided. "Sign it," he said calmly. "Let's stop dragging this out." Elaine stayed silent. Ethan too. That silence used to hurt me. Now it confirmed everything. I reached for the pen, but I didn't sign. Instead, I looked at Laura, who had been quietly sitting near the end of the table as my support guest. She opened her bag and placed a sealed envelope in front of me. I stood up. "My turn," I said softly. I opened it. First document, Ethan Caldwell's vasectomy record, dated years before our marriage. Certified, stamped, undeniable. Second, my pregnancy test confirmation and medical report, 8 weeks. Third, a full timeline showing he knew everything before our wedding. I turned the papers so everyone could see. "He knew I could never be the problem," I said. "And let me carry the blame anyway." Richard froze. Elaine covered her mouth. Ethan finally looked at me, fully, terrified. And for the first time, no one spoke. The silence after the truth wasn't empty. It was collapsing. Richard's hand tightened around the edge of the table like he was trying to hold reality in place. Elaine's eyes moved between the documents, rereading them as if repetition could rewrite them. Ethan just sat there, finally stripped of every layer of control he had used for years: silence, avoidance, distance. Laura spoke first, calm and precise. I verified everything twice. Medical records, dates, signatures. The vasectomy happened 3 years before the marriage. He knew before Sarah ever became part of this family. She turned slightly toward Ethan. And there's no ambiguity in the pregnancy report either. 8 weeks. Medically confirmed. That was the moment Richard lost composure. "This is impossible," he said sharply, but his voice cracked halfway through it. Not because he didn't believe it, but because he did, and it destroyed the narrative he had built his entire authority on. Elaine turned toward Ethan, almost whispering. "You let us do this, for years?" Ethan finally spoke, but it wasn't defense. It was collapse. "I didn't think it would go this far." That sentence landed harder than any accusation. I stayed standing. Not emotional. Not shaking. Just clear. "You didn't think it would go this far," I repeated quietly. "But you watched it go exactly this far." I placed my hand on the divorce papers Richard had brought. Then I signed. Slow. Controlled. Final. "Here's what happens next," I said. Richard tried to regain control. "You're not taking anything from this house." I looked at him. "I'm not taking anything. The settlement terms already favor me, because your son's financial disclosures were reviewed months ago during my legal consultation. Laura ensured that everything tied to marital assets was properly documented." Laura added without emotion, "legally airtight." For the first time, Richard had nothing to counter. Ethan stood abruptly. Sarah, please. I didn't raise my voice. I already stopped being your responsibility the moment you decided I could carry a lie you created. The room didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to argue. Aftermath. The divorce was finalized weeks later without contest. Ethan's family attempted damage control, but the medical records became a quiet professional scandal for Richard when questions about ethical interference in private medical documentation surfaced in his business network. His influence didn't disappear overnight, but it fractured. People stopped trusting certainty that had been built on silence. Elaine withdrew completely from public family roles. Not out of punishment, but because there was nothing left for her to defend. Ethan never challenged the divorce terms again. He disappeared from my life shortly after signing the final agreement. He did not meet his child. And I didn't wait for him to try. The house was awarded to me in the settlement due to financial imbalance disclosures and emotional misconduct documentation Laura had prepared legally and thoroughly. I kept it, not as a trophy, but as stability for what was coming. 6 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. No one from Ethan's family was present. My mother was. Laura was. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living inside someone else's expectations. I named my son Noah. Not after legacy. Not after obligation. But after something that finally felt like peace. Final closure. Ethan lost more than a marriage. He lost the ability to control the narrative that protected him for years. And when truth finally replaced silence, there was nothing left for that family structure to stand on. Richard lost influence. Elaine lost denial. Ethan lost access. And I lost nothing that mattered. Because I didn't leave that table broken. I left it informed. Rebuilt. And free. If there's one question left to ask, it's this. How many lives stay quietly destroyed simply because no one speaks the truth early enough? If this story stayed with you, don't just move on without reacting. Hit like if you felt the weight of Sarah's journey, subscribe for more stories about quiet revenge and powerful turnarounds, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what moment hit you the hardest.